Welcome back, Rebel fans. You're listening to another episode of the Rebel Talk presented by the Rebel Walk. I'm Kam Wicker, and as always, I'm here with.
Zach Moreth.
And we have another podcast for you, a little recap of South Carolina game this past weekend. Ole Miss came out with a victory, 27-3. Started off pretty high on the offensive side of the ball to start the game. Kind of slowed down a little bit in the second half. Zach Dart, I think, went 14 for 26. Kind of struggled a little bit in the second half. About 70 of those yards came in the second half. A lot of targets for Juice Wells. Trey Harris went down later in the game. We'll talk a little bit about that later. J.J. Pegues rushed for 2 touchdowns, got 4 on the year. Off the top of my head, I saw a graphic that was more than Donovan Edwards on the year, more than Jarquez Hunter for Auburn on the year. So Pegues is doing something that a defensive lineman doesn't usually do right now in college football. But overall, great game from the defense. It just seemed like the defense kind of put it together, Zach. And overall, what are your thoughts on that Ole Miss victory this past Saturday?
Yeah, Cam, I thought the defense played exceptional. Like you said, the front seven was just absolutely blowing up the South Carolina offensive line all game. They were making life hell for Lenore Sellers and Robbie Ashford. Again, couldn't generate any sort of offensive momentum. Their longest pass of the day was for 17 yards. And that rush defense, again, proved to be elite. I think South Carolina was averaging 3.5 yards per carry. And again, this is a team who has Rocket Sanders and a really rush-heavy quarterback core, and they weren't able to get anything going. So huge shout out to that front seven. And then Cam and I talked about it, but there were definitely some adjustments in the secondary in terms of playing more of a zone coverage versus heavy man-to-man. Now, Lane said it in his presser, the South Carolina passing attack isn't elite. It's not at the level as, again, like you're going to see against LSU. So it was a good chance for our secondary to regroup and get their feet again. And I think they did that. But now you have to take that momentum against Kyron Lacey, Garrett Nussmeier, and a really pass-heavy offense who's very creative. But, staying on the topic of this game, again, I thought Ole Miss did a lot of things well. Offensively, Jackson Dart missed quite a few deep balls, which earlier in the season didn't seem to be a problem. But these past 2 weeks, he really hasn't looked the same. Now, obviously, competition has gotten a lot better, but it's something you would like to see change. We'll talk about Trey Harris, like Cam said, but I would like to see Caden Prieskorn get more involved. I'd like to see, a couple more maybe screen passes, getting the ball in the hands of your guys like Caden Lee and Jordan Watkins, just so these drives aren't ending so quickly. It feels like when Ole Miss doesn't generate either a field goal or a touchdown drive, it's usually a 3-and-out or a first down and then 3-and-out. So just trying to progress down the field and keep the ball in your hands for longer. I'd love to see that time of possession increase. But all in all, Ole Miss won 27-3 and, ranked number 9, getting a little more respect. But again, another huge test on the road in Baton Rouge this Saturday.
Absolutely. And I want to touch a little bit just on you talked about the end there. Ole Miss kind of not taking their time as much on offense, kind of short drives there at some points, kind of seems wasteful at sometimes when you go quick 3-and-out and it's like 30 seconds. I don't know if many of you remember late in that game, in the South Carolina game, there was, I think, over an 8-minute drive, 11 plays for the Rebels to kind of just drain the last little bit of the clock there. And they turned it over on downs at the end of that drive, but they moved the ball deep into South Carolina territory and just
100%.
drained the clock. Just like even though this is a no-huddle type of offense for Ole Miss, there's still ways to drain the clock. You don't have to go always so fast. You can take your time off the play clock, give your guys a breather. Standing at the line of scrimmage. And I think that's what Ole Miss did late in the game, kind of just draining the clock there at the end to secure the victory. But you're going to have to do that going down the road to Baton Rouge in a game where it's going to be kind of similar in South Carolina, even louder probably in Baton Rouge, a tougher opponent as well. And we'll talk more about that LSU matchup later this week in a different podcast. But touching again just on the game more, Dart in the second half, it seemed like he, like you said, missed a lot of the deep balls. We didn't really see a lot of that early in the year. It seemed like early in the year, granted, lesser competition, but it seemed like Dart wasn't really missing those type of passes early in the year. And there was at least 2 to Juice Wells in this game that he could have hit for touchdowns, it seemed like at points. Obviously, Juice Wells could have had another touchdown of his own, fumbling in the end zone late in the second half in that game. And unfortunate situation there. Also wanted to say no signs of Bentley as well. We really haven't heard much about Bentley since Kiffin's commented on him in past weeks. running backs looked kind of banged up for the Rebels this past week. Henry Parrish kind of looked a little banged up going into the game, and it seemed like he got more banged up after over the course of that game. It seemed like Matt Jones, when he dove for tried to dive for that touchdown that got overturned, seemed like he got a little banged up on that play too. So Kiffin commented on that today about them guys being a little banged up. So we'll have to see how that running back situation works out for Ole Miss. But all in all, I thought the offense kind of was lacking in the second half for the, I guess, lack of a better term. It seemed like just wasn't much there with the play calls, and it seemed like it kind of got conservative at some points for the offense in the second half.
Yeah, you're spot on, Cam. And again, Juice Wells, he tries to switch the ball to the other hand. Cam mentioned it, but so you're looking at a game that realistically should have been 34-3 with a touchdown in the second half, but that didn't happen. And again, Jackson, the accuracy has not been there, and he really has a good opportunity to try and find it against LSU. We were talking about Henry Parrish and his injuries. Looked like maybe something with his collarbone. Again, I'm not too sure that Parrish is going to play this week. And with that being said, you kind of have to evaluate who do you want starting this game. And this isn't a disrespect shot to Matt Jones, but there are guys on the bench who've started in these types of games and in premier games. You got Amos and everyone's favorite player, number 24, Ulysses Bentley, who we're still waiting to see, is he ever going to play? This is a guy who you brought back. You hyped him up on social media all offseason, and he hasn't touched the ball yet. Strange situation if Parrish is injured. We'll see. Maybe we'll get some questions answered. But another bad situation is with Trey Harris. Now, I've heard 1,000 things, Cam. Like the second someone goes down, rumor mill goes berserk. I'll tell you this. After Trey went down, he was holding, it looked like the lower part of his right leg around the ankle, Achilles area. And after that happened, he was jogging on the sidelines, putting full pressure on that leg. He was also biking on the sidelines, which uses those lower leg muscles. And if I'm being honest, I thought he was going to go back in the game at halftime. And talking to Lane, apparently that wasn't the case. I thought maybe if the game was close, that Trey would have gone in, and Lane denied that. Now, again, rumors. Are we going to believe what Lane says because he loves to throw teams off with the injury? I don't know, Cam. Where's your head at with this?
For me, I think there's ways to look at it. We've heard the Trey Harris Achilles tear rumors these past couple of days, even just today, really. But like you said, it's kind of hard to believe watching Trey Harris jog on the sideline and seeming like that at some point he could have went back in that game if he needed to. Obviously, Ole Miss had a comfortable lead late in that game and felt like the game was pretty much in their hands, didn't allow Trey Harris to go back in the game. And it seemed like Dart was kind of targeting Juice Wells more in that game anyway. But we talked about this as well, too. If Trey Harris is able to play on Saturday, he's a Louisiana guy. He's grew up not too far from Baton Rouge. You best believe he's gonna suit up and want to play in Baton Rouge in front of probably family and friends that he hasn't seen in a while, probably past teammates that are on LSU maybe. If Trey Harris is able to play this weekend, I believe he'll be on the field. No doubt.
100%, Cam. This is a guy, I think he posted it on his Instagram story, a picture at Tiger Stadium before the season started, and he put the date of the game, if I'm remembering correctly.
Yep.
Again, coming out of the portal from LA Tech, he didn't get an offer from LSU, so there's definitely some bad blood there. And, you could tell after last year's game and the way he performed in it, he cares a lot about this rivalry. So if he doesn't play, there is definitely a huge level of concern with what's going on with his injury, because then you kind of have to start thinking long term. And it changes the whole scheme of the game. We'll break this down later in the week when Cam and I record next, and there'll probably be an injury report out at that point. But with no Trey Harris, the LSU defense, which isn't great, has a chance to maybe be good in their pass defense, trying to take the ball away from guys like Juice Wells and Watkins and Caden Lee. And that's why it's going to be so important to get Caden Prescorn involved and Daquan Wright. And again, I don't enjoy seeing them line up wide so much because they're not those speed guys who are going to burn off a DB with a slant over the middle. Let's get these guys in the middle of the field and let's execute a little bit. The one pass to Prescorn, For those that remember, it was like an offsides call, but that play ended up happening because it was offsides. Prescorn was wide open, and he's athletic enough to go up and make a nice grab. So let's get the ball in his hands, regardless of Trey's injury, but it changes the whole landscape of the game.
Absolutely, it's going to be interesting to see how this Ole Miss team is going to handle that if Trey doesn't play. I know Kiffin said in his press conference today they're preparing as if he's not going to play,
Yeah.
so they're preparing to get other guys the football. So we'll see how Dart handles that going into Baton Rouge. Just some other injury updates. Princely did not play. Princely Umamielen did not play this past weekend against South Carolina. Not really too sure about the updated status on him right now. I'll have to see how the week progresses. I believe he was in a boot this past weekend on the sideline, Zach claimed, and so not really too sure how that's going to go into play this weekend. But on the bright side for the Rebels, since Suntarine Perkins looked great this past weekend, and he looked great the weekend before that. You just happened to lose to Kentucky, but he's really turned it on this year and these past 2 weeks in general. And last week he got a chance to just get after the quarterback all game long, not really having a guy sub in for him too often.
Yeah.
And he looked great out there, and he was a great addition a great guy to keep on this defensive line that's pretty much elite for Ole Miss this year, 24 sacks, leading the country in that category. So, but obviously Princey's a big part of this defensive line, facing two top-level tackles for LSU this coming up weekend. So if you get Princely back, it makes it even better and even harder for guys like Will Campbell and Emory Jones on the outside for LSU. But Perkins is seeming to show that he can hold his own in the SEC as of right now.
Yeah, no, Perkins he's phenomenal, and he's really made some good improvements coming off of last year. And you guys, you got to remember that Perkins is a guy who played basically wildcat running back for every play in high school, and then turn around and played linebacker and DB and defensive line, all these different positions for his high school team. I mean, the kid has a motor that you can't believe, and he's finally getting to show it off in a intense, high level SEC game. So in a way, I'm never glad that an Ole Miss player gets hurt, but I think the opportunity that Perkins is getting without Princely, it gives Ole Miss an even greater sense of depth because you look at those first 4 games against the non-cons, and Perkins really wasn't playing at all. If you guys remember, he had that interception at the end of the Wake Forest game. Like, he was a guy who was playing those dead minutes of the game. And now he comes in here, he has an opportunity, and he fully takes advantage of it. So I think Princely he has more confidence to take his time to fully recover. And I think the Ole Miss defense has more confidence knowing that when Princely comes back, you now have an elite edge rotation with Perkins fully involved in the mix.
Absolutely. And then Perkins is a guy that can play linebacker. We haven't really seen much of him playing linebacker since he's been at Ole Miss, but that is a position that was willing to play coming in, and that I'm sure Pete Golden has in the back of his mind that he can play. Obviously, those positions right now at middle linebacker belong to TJ Daugherty and Pooh Paul, along with Kari Coleman. So we'll have to see where Perkins kind of ends up next year, but it seems like he's kind of found a home on the edge out there. And regardless of whether Princely plays this weekend, Perkins will definitely come to play against LSU this weekend. Some other injury updates. We got Parrish Jr. and Matt Jones. Talked a little bit about that a second ago. Like Zach said, if Parrish can't go, it's kind of hard to believe. No disrespect to Matt Jones. It's kind of hard to believe you throw a guy out there at that size in a big-time SEC game like that. So we'll have to see what the coaching staff does regards to the running back situation come Saturday, because as of right now, it seems like Parrish Jr. Might be one of the most banged up guys on the team.
Yeah, without a doubt, Cam. And it's not a disrespecting to Parrish, but he is a smaller type running back. He's a quick, speedy guy, and I'm not trying to use like a disrespectful comparison, but they're using him as if he has the body type of Quinshon Judkins. It's not really fair to the kid when he's getting banged up like this against a Kentucky defense and a South Carolina defense consisting of massive, fast, and really physical players. So even if Parrish is good to go, I don't think he'll be at full strength. And I definitely don't think it's the right choice to be using him in the fashion that they have when you have so many players on the bench, specifically Ulysses Bentley, ready to go, if you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Some other ones off the top of my head, we got Jeremy James, I believe, was back in uniform and warming up. I do not recall how many snaps he got, if any, at guard or tackle this past week. I know Caleb Warren got in the game for Reese McIntyre at one point at center. Caleb Warren is back. So it seems like the Ole Miss offensive line is going to get back a little bit of their depth despite losing Jalen Williams this past week. And also Lewis Moore on the defensive side of the ball, still no signs of him and no really update there. And Chris Graves as well. On the right side for the missing in action of Lewis Moore, we have Yam Banks kind of stepped up this week. Didn't
Yeah.
really play a lot, but it seemed like Yam Banks kind of came up in some big moments when Ole Miss needed him. Don't really know why he hasn't played much in the past. Maybe he hadn't adjusted to this defense as well yet, but it seemed like Yam Banks kind of fit right in that kind of nickel spot. He's a big guy, and it seemed like when you play guys that have play teams that have big tight ends like South Carolina did, it seems like you can rely on Banks to get out there and guard those guys.
Yeah, and you talked about Yam, but I believe he had one of the deflections in the end zone, if I'm remembering correctly. It was one of those plays, and there was no defensive pass interference. He played it clean, and he's doing a really nice job filling in for Lewis Moore, who really was starting to solidify himself, as a very similar player to Trey Washington, a guy who makes a ridiculous amount of tackles and a guy who can cover at the same time. But again, the depth of this team, it's continuing to show. And I thought Caleb Warren was a guy who had his spot fully sealed up coming into the season. And there's some competition, and Reese McIntyre takes over. He goes down for a little bit, and Warren comes in. It's no problem. And again, I think Jaden Williams, there was a lot of speculation that he had like an ACL tear, but he was on the injury report last week. And I believe on Wednesday, he was listed as questionable or doubtful. But if he tore his ACL, he'd probably be listed as out. So I don't know what the situation is, but if what I'm looking at is correct, we'll definitely see him at some point over the next couple weeks. And if it's not against LSU, I'd imagine against Oklahoma.
Absolutely. I think that's all we got for you guys on the injury updates. We'll have to get more on that on the next podcast. Obviously, we said injury update comes out Wednesday, and we'll get to reading that and get all that info out for you guys on the next podcast. Ole Miss opened up as a 2.5-point favorite of LSU in this Saturday's matchup. Top two passers in the SEC in Jackson Dart versus Garrett Nussmeier. Elite offensive line in LSU versus elite defensive line for the Rebels. 6:30 p.m. in Death Valley. It's going to be a good football weekend. It was a great football weekend last weekend, and there wasn't really a lot of ranked matchups. Going to be a ton of ranked matchups this weekend, and should be another great weekend of college football. I think that's all we got for you guys today. So just be able to make sure to stay tuned to the rebelwalk.com for all your Ole Miss sports needs.